All right, let's talk about the ancient Assyrian Empire. You've probably heard of them, one of the most fearsome military powers in history, right? But we're not just going to talk about their conquests. We're going to dig into a really fascinating puzzle. How on earth did they fund that terrifying war machine?
So, here's the core problem, and it's a big one. Just picture it. You're the king of Assyria. You've built this massive professional army. I mean, the best in the world. But, and this is a huge but, you're living in a time before money. Like, no coins, nothing. So, how do you pay all those soldiers? How do you keep them loyal? How do you make sure they're ready to fight when you need them? Well, their solution was both brutal and weirdly brilliant. It was constant war. Yeah, you heard that right. For the Assyrians, war wasn't just about politics or glory. It was their economy. It was the engine that powered the whole empire. It's literally how they paid the bills. So let's really get into this idea of an empire without coins. To understand just how radical their solution was, you have to put yourself in their shoes. This was the fundamental economic problem they were up against. Think about it. A powerful professional army needs to get paid consistently. We're not talking about farmers who pick up a spear once a year. These are full-time soldiers. And professionals, well, they expect a paycheck. If you can't pay them, loyalty just evaporates, right? And suddenly, that pillar holding up your entire empire, it just turns to dust. The stakes for the Assyrians were unbelievably high. So how did they solve this massive payroll problem? Well, they turned violence into a business model. Seriously, they completely reframed the whole idea of war. It wasn't an expense anymore, it was their main source of revenue. It wasn't just profitable, their entire state was built around it, like a corporation. You could almost define it in modern business terms. It's an economic model where the main activity is warfare. The objective, resource acquisition. And the biggest line item on the budget, the army's salary, gets paid directly from the revenue you generate from that warfare. It's a chillingly logical, self-contained system. Okay, so what did payment actually look like? If they weren't handing out coins, what were the soldiers getting? The answer is simple: plunder. The spoils of war became the actual currency for this whole military economic machine. And this wasn't random. It became a very predictable, almost corporate cycle. Step 1, you target a city or a state that's rich in resources. Step 2, you launch your campaign. Step 3, you conquer them and seize absolutely everything of value, plunder and people. And finally, step 4, you redistribute that wealth to your army and to the state, which, you guessed it, funds the next campaign. Rinse and repeat. And when we say revenue, what are we talking about? Well, it was a lot more than just precious metals and goods. Sure, they took gold and silver, but they also took agricultural resources, livestock, grain, stuff you need to feed an empire. They'd also demand tribute from the states they conquered, which was kind of like an ongoing tax. And, maybe most importantly, they took people. Captives were treated as human assets. Skilled workers, laborers, they were a critical part of the economic haul. This whole thing was the engine of their expansion. But, and this is the really critical part, this incredibly effective system had a fatal flaw baked right into its DNA. It demanded perpetual growth. It was kind of like a shark. It had to keep moving, keep conquering, or it would die. So let's break down this vicious cycle, piece by piece. It all starts with that basic need we talked about at the beginning, to pay the army. The empire needed wealth. No negotiation there. Okay, so where do you get that wealth? Well, the only way to really get it was to conquer new places. Sure, tribute from places you already controlled helped, but what you really needed were those big, fresh injections of cash, or, loot, that only a new conquest could provide. And how do you conquer new territory? Well, to do that, you need your massive, powerful, and very, very expensive army. And boom, the loop is complete. The solution to paying the army was to use the army to get the stuff to pay the army. It just feeds on itself. And this quote really sums up the whole impossible situation they were in. Peace meant bankruptcy. Expansion was a necessity, not a choice. Just think about that. Peace was not an option. It was an economic death sentence. They had to keep fighting. So you have to ask, was a system like this doomed to fail? I mean, what are the inevitable consequences of running an entire economy based on war? And really, this is the main takeaway. For a while, this model was incredibly effective. It's what made them so dominant for so long. But it was also incredibly fragile. It was just unsustainable. A system that needs infinite growth can't survive in a finite world. Eventually, you run out of rich neighbors to plunder, your supply lines get stretched too thin, and the whole engine just burns itself out. So this leaves us with a pretty provocative question, one that goes way beyond ancient Assyria. When is a war really about security, and when is it about economics? The Assyrians are this really stark, clear-cut example of war being an economic tool. And it kind of forces us to look at all of history, maybe even today, and ask, how often are those lines between national security and economic interests really, really blurry?